Below is the same substance rewritten as a single continuous essay, designed for 30 minutes of oral delivery with no section breaks, no headers, and no tonal breaks. The style remains analytic and reflective, in the vein of a Justin Sledge lecture. Slow, precise, concerned less with outcomes than with how the law reasons itself into them. Legal systems rarely collapse through spectacular wrongdoing. They erode instead through misdescription, through the quiet substitution of one term for another, through the gradual normalization of language that conceals rather than clarifies power. Few substitutions are more consequential than the replacement of taking with gift, or misappropriation with discretion, or silence with neutrality. Trust law exists precisely because ordinary property law fails at the moment when control and permission become disentangled. The trustee occupies a liminal position, holding lawful power over property that does not belong to them, constrained by duties that exist precisely because the temptation to misuse that power is both predictable and human. To understand how disputes over trusts, gifts, and fiduciary misconduct actually resolve, one must abandon moral intuition and attend instead to the analytic machinery of the law itself. Burden shifting, evidentiary presumptions, and the law's deep suspicion of stories that are not anchored to authority. At the foundation of this machinery lies the concept of a taking. Modern law no longer defines a taking as the physical removal of an object. That definition collapsed when property ceased to be merely tangible. A taking is now understood as the exercise of control over property belonging to another without lawful authority in a way that deprives the owner of possession, use, or enjoyment. Movement is incidental. Force is unnecessary. Secrecy is optional. What matters is control and deprivation. This matters enormously in fiduciary contexts because so many of the most consequential acts involve not action but restraint. A trustee who simply declines to distribute funds after a beneficiary's right has vested has not done nothing. They have exercised control. Deprivation exists not because money moved, but because it did not. The beneficiary's inability to use what is rightfully theirs is the legally salient harm. Against this concept stands the gift, which is often treated colloquially as the opposite of theft. In law, however, a gift is not merely the absence of wrongdoing. It is a tightly structured legal event that defeats a taking only if its internal requirements are satisfied. A valid gift requires donative intent, delivery, and acceptance. Each element matters, but intent is the most fragile. Consent in law is not binary. The question is never simply whether someone said yes, but whether that yes was informed, voluntary, capacitated, and untainted by fraud or domination. Where consent is distorted, the gift collapses, and the act beneath it is recharacterized according to its substance rather than its label. This is why courts are deeply skeptical of gifts that arise within fiduciary relationships. The very structure of such relationships undermines the reliability of consent. Where one party controls information, timing, access, or interpretation, the law presumes risk. This presumption is not moralistic. It is structural. It reflects the law's recognition that power distorts decision-making, even in the absence of malicious intent. The trustee exemplifies this problem in its purest form. A trustee holds lawful possession without beneficial ownership. This is an extraordinary legal position, and the law responds to it by imposing duties that are correspondingly extraordinary. Discretion in this context is not freedom. It is bounded authority. Courts evaluate the exercise of discretion not by asking whether the outcome was reasonable in hindsight, but by examining whether the act was authorized by the trust instrument, pursued for a proper trust purpose, rather than personal benefit, and exercised in good faith through contemporaneous judgment. When trustees say, "I had discretion," they are not asserting immunity. They are inviting scrutiny. Discretion without boundary is indistinguishable from ownership, and the law will not permit that collapse. Where the trust instrument imposes a mandatory duty, discretion disappears entirely. Language such as "shall distribute" is not aspirational. It is operative. Failure to implement a mandatory distribution is not a judgment call. It is a breach. Courts describe such failures as breach of trust, wrongful withholding, and in some contexts, conversion. The trustee's intent is largely irrelevant at this stage. Civil liability attaches because authority ended and control continued. This is one of the cleanest violations in fiduciary law and courts treat it harshly, precisely because it undermines the reliability of the trust instrument itself. Delay without justification is not neutral. It is continued dominion. At times, fiduciary breaches begin to resemble criminal conduct, though courts are careful not to conflate the two. Criminal liability requires a mental state that civil equity does not, yet the structural overlap is obvious. Trustees possess lawful access by definition. When they use that access for unauthorized purposes, especially where personal benefit, concealment, or falsification is present, the conduct aligns closely with embezzlement. Intent to repay does not cure this. Temporary diversion remains diversion. This explains why criminal prosecutions are rare, while civil consequences are common. Criminal law demands certainty beyond a reasonable doubt. Equity demands accountability on a balance of probabilities. The absence of criminal charges speaks only to prosecutorial thresholds, not to the legality of the conduct itself. One of the most persistent misunderstandings in fiduciary disputes is the belief that silence preserves safety. In trust law, silence is often damning. Trustees bear affirmative duties to account, to inform, and to justify deviations from the instrument. When a trustee fails to speak, courts do not infer neutrality. They infer unjustified control. This inference is strongest where the trustee alone controls records and timing. Ambiguity is charged against the party best positioned to eliminate it. Silence in equity has weight. Most trust disputes ultimately turn not on persuasion, but on burden allocation. The beneficiary's initial burden is modest. Identify the trust language, show trustee control, and demonstrate non-performance. Once this is done, the burden shifts decisively to the trustee. The trustee must justify authority, purpose, and reasonableness. This burden shift is often fatal because it transforms plausibility into insufficiency. Trustees are not required merely to tell a believable story. They are required to prove compliance. This is why cases do not stalemate when narratives appear equally persuasive. Fiduciaries lose ties. That is not bias. It is doctrine. When stories cancel each other out, courts abandon narrative entirely and ask mechanical questions. Who had control? Who was required to act? Who benefited during the period of ambiguity? Who failed to document? Who owed transparency? These questions are not moral judgments, they are structural diagnostics. When the answers point consistently in one direction, judgment follows even in the absence of bad intent. Equity does not require villains, it requires explanation. Probate courts resolve these disputes without juries precisely because the remedies involved are equitable rather than legal. Trust disputes require instrument interpretation, duty calibration, and tailored remedies. These are technical tasks ill-suited to popular judgment. As a result, probate judges impose consequences without theatrical condemnation. They order distributions, impose interest, surcharge losses, compel accountings, and remove trustees. The vocabulary is civil. The effects are not mild. Trustees often invoke advice of counsel as a shield, but it protects only where reliance was genuine, reasonable, and based on full disclosure. Selective consultation or post hoc legal rationalization frequently backfires by demonstrating awareness of risk. Lawyers advise, trustees decide. The duty is non-delegable. What emerges from this analysis is not a morality play, but a system of structured skepticism. Trust law assumes that power distorts judgment, that silence conceals risk, that control demands justification, and that ambiguity favors the vulnerable party. These assumptions are not cynical, they are empirical. The trustee who complies need not fear them. The trustee who delays, conceals, or recharacterizes will be undone by them. These doctrines matter beyond probate. They inform how law understands consent in unequal relationships, authority in delegated systems, and harm without spectacle. A gift is not benevolence unless consent is real. Discretion is not freedom unless bounded. Silence is not innocence when duty speaks. Trust law, stripped of jargon, is a study in power under constraint. It asks not whether someone intended harm, but whether they respected limits. That question, quietly applied, remains one of the law's most enduring tools.